To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, we'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Intensive Care. The fluorescent lights of St. Catherine's Hospital hummed overhead as Preston Ballard sat rigid in the ICU waiting room, his hands clasped so tight his knuckles had gone white. Through the small window, he could see his wife Bridget lying motionless, tubes and wires connecting her to machines that beeped with mechanical indifference. The doctors said she'd stabilized after the accident, but she hadn't woken up. Severe head trauma. Induced coma. The words echoed in his mind like a funeral dirge. His daughter Emma sat beside him, unusually quiet. At 11, she was typically a chatterbox, always asking questions, always observing. But since they'd arrived 3 hours ago, she'd barely spoken. Her small hand gripped his arm, and Preston noticed she kept glancing toward the nurse's station with an expression he'd only seen once before, when she was 7 and thought someone was breaking into their house. Fear. Dad. Her voice was barely a whisper. What is it, sweetheart? Preston turned to her, trying to soften his expression despite the vice grip of anxiety crushing his chest. Emma's eyes darted to a man in a suit, standing near the elevator. Preston followed her gaze. The man was speaking with a police officer, gesturing occasionally toward the ICU. Nothing unusual. Cops always came to hospitals for accident reports. But Emma's breathing had quickened. Emma, what's wrong? She grabbed his hand, her small fingers ice cold. Dad, we have to run. Now. Preston blinked, confused. What are you talking about? His daughter looked at him with tears brimming in her eyes, then glanced around the waiting room. A nurse was walking toward them with a clipboard. The man in the suit had turned in their direction. I can't tell you here, Emma whispered urgently, pulling his arm. Please, Dad. Mom told me. She said if anything happened to her, I should get you away from the hospital. She said to trust no one here. Preston's military training kicked in before his conscious mind could process. 12 years in Army intelligence had taught him to trust his gut, and right now his gut was screaming that his daughter wasn't being paranoid. Bridget wasn't the type to plant contingency fears in their daughter's mind without reason. He stood smoothly, keeping his expression neutral. Okay, we're going to walk to the bathroom. Normal pace. They moved down the corridor, Preston's hand on Emma's shoulder. He could feel eyes tracking them. As they rounded the corner toward the restrooms, Preston instead pulled Emma toward the emergency stairwell. The moment the door closed behind them, he knelt before her. Talk to me. Right now. Emma's tears spilled over. Mom's laptop. She hid it in my closet 2 weeks ago. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I'd get you and we'd leave immediately. She said there are bad people, and they might try to hurt us too. Preston's blood ran cold. Bridget was a forensic accountant, working contract investigations for various firms. She'd been working late for months, stressed about something she wouldn't discuss. Did your mom tell you what she was working on? No, but I looked at the laptop yesterday. Emma's voice dropped. I'm sorry, I know I wasn't supposed to, but I was worried about her. Dad, there were pictures of girls, young girls, and documents about buildings and... She shuddered. One of the files had a video. I only watched a few seconds before I closed it. It was horrible. Preston pulled his daughter into his arms, his mind racing. Human trafficking. Jesus Christ. If Bridget had evidence of a trafficking operation and someone found out. The car accident. A rainy night. Witnesses said she'd swerved suddenly and hit the median. But Bridget was an excellent driver. What if it wasn't an accident? Emma, the man in the suit. Did you recognize him? She nodded against his chest. He came to our house 3 weeks ago. I heard him talking to Mom in the office. He was angry. He said she needed to stop asking questions or she'd regret it. Mom told him to leave. Preston's jaw clenched. Someone had threatened his wife, then she'd ended up in a coma. And now that same someone was here at the hospital. He pulled out his phone, but Emma grabbed his wrist. Mom said not to call anyone. She said they might have people everywhere. Smart woman. If this trafficking ring was big enough, they'd have corrupt officials on payroll. Preston's mind clicked through options with cold efficiency. They needed to disappear, get somewhere safe, and figure out what Bridget had discovered. Then he needed to decide what to do with that information. We're leaving. Quietly, Preston led Emma down the stairs, listening for footsteps. They exited on the ground floor through a side door used by maintenance staff. The parking garage was 2 buildings over. They walked quickly, but not so fast as to draw attention. Preston's Ford Explorer was on level 3. As they approached it, he scanned for any sign of surveillance or tampering. Clear. They got in, and he started the engine, pulling out of the space with practiced calm. "Where are we going?" Emma asked, buckling her seatbelt. "Somewhere safe. Then you're going to show me everything on that laptop." Chapter 2. The Evidence. They drove for 40 minutes before Preston was satisfied they weren't being followed. He took them to a small motel outside the city limits, the kind of place that still took cash and didn't ask questions. Room 17 smelled like cigarettes and industrial cleaner, but it had 2 beds and a chain lock. Emma sat cross-legged on one bed, while Preston retrieved the laptop from where she'd hidden it in her school backpack. Smart kid. If anyone had searched their house, they'd have looked in obvious places. The laptop required a password. Preston tried their anniversary, Emma's birthday, a few other combinations. Nothing worked. "Try Emma Strong 2013, his daughter said quietly. "That's what she always called me when I was scared. Emma Strong. And 2013 is the year I was born." Preston typed it in. The screen unlocked. What he found in the folders made his blood boil. Bridget had been thorough. Over 6 months, she'd compiled financial records, property deeds, surveillance photos, and witness testimony. The target, Vincent Rogers, a real estate mogul who'd built half the commercial properties in the city over the past decade. Preston remembered Vincent. They'd served together briefly in Iraq. Vincent in logistics, Preston in intelligence. After discharge, Vincent had come back home and started Rogers' development group. He'd been successful, almost too successful. Preston had seen him at charity events, always smiling, always generous with donations. They'd had dinner twice over the years, their wives becoming friendly. That friendship now felt like poison. According to Bridget's files, Vincent's empire was built on blood money. He'd been using his construction projects as fronts for human trafficking. New apartment complexes would be built with hidden rooms and reinforced basement spaces. The buildings would house trafficking victims, sometimes for weeks, before they were moved elsewhere. The operation was sophisticated. Vincent had officials in the city planning department, a few cops, even a judge on his payroll. But Bridget had found something else. A ledger showing payments to a man named Al Acevedo, who ran a trucking company. Cross-referencing with missing persons reports, Bridget had identified at least 15 women who'd disappeared after being spotted near Rogers' properties. There were photos of young women being led into buildings late at night. Grainy, but clear enough. The final folder was labeled Insurance. Preston opened it. Inside was a video file dated 2 weeks ago. Preston hit play, angling the screen away from Emma. The video showed Vincent Rogers in what appeared to be a warehouse office. He was speaking with 2 other men. The audio was clear. Bridget must have planted a bug. "Can't have her talking to the feds," Vincent was saying, his voice cold and flat. Nothing like the jovial man Preston remembered. "She's got copies of everything. Financial records, photos, even testimony from one of the girls who got away." "What do you want us to do?" That was Al Acevedo, a thick-necked man with a scar down his cheek. "Make it look like an accident. Her car. Tonight, on her way home from work. She takes Highway 47, plenty of blind curves. Run her off the road. Make sure the job's done right." Preston's vision went red. He paused the video, his hands shaking with barely contained rage. Vincent Rogers had ordered his wife's murder. Emma was watching him carefully. "Dad, what are we going to do?" Preston took 3 deep breaths, forcing his mind to clear. Rage wouldn't help Bridget. He needed to be smart. Vincent had resources, connections, and a network of criminals willing to kill. Going to the police was out. Bridget's notes indicated at least 3 officers on Vincent's payroll, and she hadn't been certain who else might be compromised. The FBI? Maybe. But federal investigations took time. Months, even years. And in the meantime, Vincent would know his operation was exposed. He'd destroy evidence, kill witnesses, and possibly come after Preston and Emma to tie up loose ends. No, Preston needed to handle this differently. "Emma, listen to me carefully." He turned to face his daughter, keeping his voice steady. "What your mom discovered is important. It's going to help put bad people in jail. But right now, we need to be very careful. These people are dangerous, and they know Mom was investigating them. Are they going to come after us?" Her voice was small. "They might try, but I'm not going to let anything happen to you. I promise." Preston pulled her into a hug. "We're going to stay here tonight. Tomorrow, I'm going to make some calls to people I trust. People who can help us. But even as he said it, Preston's mind was already working on a different plan. He'd spent years in military intelligence, learning how to hunt people who didn't want to be found, how to dismantle networks, how to make enemies disappear. Vincent Rogers had declared war the moment he'd hurt Bridget. And Preston Ballard was very, very good at war. Chapter 3. Old Friends. Preston waited until Emma was asleep before making his first call. The number belonged to a man he hadn't spoken to in 4 years, but he knew it would still work. Men like Scott Nash didn't change their operational numbers. Nash picked up on the third ring. This line's supposed to be dead. It's Preston Ballard. I need a favor. There was a pause. Ballard. Heard you got out. Went civilian. Wife and kid, right? Right. Someone tried to kill my wife 2 days ago. She's in a coma. The man who ordered it is named Vincent Rogers, former Army logistics officer, now running a trafficking operation out of the city. Nash's tone sharpened. Trafficking. My wife was a forensic accountant. She was building a case. Rogers found out and had her run off the road. Preston's voice was ice. I've got all her evidence. Video of him ordering the hit. Financial records. Everything. So take it to the feds. He's got dirty cops, probably a few officials. I go through channels. He gets tipped off and runs. Evidence disappears. Witnesses die. And you want? I want to burn his whole operation to the ground. But I need to make sure my daughter stays safe while I do it. Can you help? Another pause. Nash had been in Preston's unit, one of the best operators he'd ever worked with. Retired now, running some kind of security consulting firm. Where are you? Preston gave him the motel address. Can you be here by morning? I'll bring some friends. You're going to need them. The call ended. Preston sat in the darkness, watching Emma sleep, his mind already 3 moves ahead. Vincent Rogers had made a critical mistake. He'd assumed Bridget was working alone, that eliminating her would end the threat. He hadn't counted on Preston. And he definitely hadn't counted on Preston having the kind of skills and connections that could dismantle his entire empire. Preston pulled up Vincent's file on the laptop. Rogers Development Group had its headquarters in the financial district, 23rd floor of the Meridian building. Vincent also owned a private estate outside the city, along with several properties that served as fronts for his operation. The key players in Vincent's network were identified in Bridget's notes. Al Acevedo ran the trucking operation that moved victims between locations. Ex-con with a history of violence. Ernie Good, city planning commissioner who approved all of Vincent's construction permits without inspection. Detective Lewis Barton, one of 3 cops on Vincent's payroll, handled evidence disposal and witness intimidation. Wes Meade, Vincent's personal attorney and fixer, helped launder money through various shell corporations. For major players, plus Vincent himself, taking them all down would require precision. Preston couldn't just eliminate Vincent and hope the network collapsed. He needed to dismantle it piece by piece, ensuring no one could escape or destroy evidence. But first, he needed to protect Emma. At 6:47 a.m., a black SUV pulled into the motel parking lot. Preston watched from the window as Scott Nash emerged, along with 2 other men. Preston recognized one of them, Manuel Gray, former Army Ranger who'd worked several ops with their unit. The third man was younger, maybe late 20s, but carried himself like someone who knew violence intimately. Preston opened the door before they could knock. Preston. Nash extended a hand. He looked older, graying at the temples, a few more lines around the eyes, but still carried the same solid, dangerous competence. This is Manuel, you remember him. And that's Jorge Tanner. He's new, but he's good. Appreciate you coming. Preston stepped aside to let them in. Emma was awake now, watching the strangers with wary eyes. Nash glanced at her, then back to Preston. Your daughter. Emma, these are friends of mine from the Army. They're going to help keep you safe. Manuel crouched down to Emma's level, offering a gentle smile. Hey there. You're being very brave. Your dad's told us what happened. We're going to make sure nothing bad happens to you, okay? Emma nodded slowly. She looked at Preston. Are you going after the bad man? Yes. Good. Her voice was firm, angry. He hurt Mom. He should pay. Preston felt a surge of pride. Emma was scared, but she was strong, just like her mother. Nash pulled out a secure phone. We've got a safe house 2 hours north. Former military facility, totally off-grid. Emma can stay there with Jorge and Manuel while you and I handle Rogers. No offense, Preston said, But I'm doing this alone. The hell you are. Nash's expression hardened. You want revenge, fine. But you're rusty, and Rogers has at least a dozen guys working for him. You need backup. Preston wanted to argue, but Nash was right. He hadn't been operational in years. His skills were still there, but he'd be outmanned. What's the play? Nash asked. Preston pulled up the laptop, showing them Bridget's files. As they reviewed the evidence, he explained his initial thinking. Vincent's got 4 key lieutenants. We take them down first, cut off his support structure. Then we go after Vincent himself. And the endgame? Nash asked. We killing these guys or putting them in cages? Preston met his eyes. Vincent ordered my wife's murder. The others are complicit in trafficking and multiple homicides. I'm open to suggestions, but I'm not losing sleep if none of them walk away. Nash nodded slowly. Okay, but we do this smart. No civilian casualties, no collateral damage. And we document everything. Photos, videos, confessions. When this is over, whatever we don't handle personally, the feds can use to clean up the rest. Agreed. They spent the next hour planning. Emma would go to the safe house with Jorge and Manuel. Preston and Nash would begin surveillance on Vincent's network, identifying patterns and vulnerabilities. The operation would take time, maybe a week, maybe 2, but they'd do it right. As Emma packed her things, she hugged Preston tightly. Be careful, Dad. Always am, sweetheart. He kissed her forehead. This will all be over soon. Then we're going to bring your mom home. After they left, Preston and Nash began the real work. First target. Nash asked. Preston pulled up a surveillance photo of Al Acevedo loading trucks at a warehouse. The trucker. He's the muscle, and he personally ran my wife off the road. I want him first. Chapter 4. The trucker. Al Acevedo's warehouse sat in an industrial zone near the docks, surrounded by chain-link fencing and razor wire. According to Bridget's notes, the legitimate part of his trucking business covered shipments along the eastern seaboard. The illegitimate part moved human cargo through a network of safe houses and underground routes. Preston and Nash had been watching the warehouse for 2 days, documenting patterns. Acevedo typically arrived at 7 a.m. and stayed until 6 p.m. He had 5 employees, 3 drivers, and 2 warehouse workers, all with criminal records. At night, the facility was guarded by a single security guard who spent most of his shift in the booth watching videos on his phone. Tonight, Nash asked. They were in a rented van a block away, using telephoto lenses to monitor activity. Tonight, Preston confirmed. Acevedo stays late on Thursdays to do payroll. Building should be mostly empty by 8 p.m. They waited until darkness fell. At 7:52 p.m., the last employee left the warehouse. The security guard was in his booth, oblivious. Acevedo's BMW was still in the parking lot. Preston and Nash approached from the rear of the building, moving through shadows with practiced silence. Nash had brought equipment, lock picks, zip ties, a military-grade taser, and 2 suppressed pistols. Preston carried a Sig Sauer P226, his old service weapon that he'd kept oiled and ready despite never expecting to use it again. The rear door had an electronic lock. Nash bypassed it in under 2 minutes. They entered the warehouse, moving between stacks of crates and equipment. Overhead lights cast harsh shadows. Acevedo's office was on the 2nd floor, a glassed-in room overlooking the warehouse floor. Through the window, Preston could see Acevedo at his desk, working on a computer. He was alone. They climbed the metal stairs slowly, minimizing noise. Preston reached the office door first. It was unlocked. He pushed it open silently, Nash right behind him. Acevedo looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to recognition to fear in the span of 2 seconds. Preston Ballard, he said slowly, his hand moving toward the desk drawer. Don't. Preston's pistol was already aimed at Acevedo's head. Hands on the desk. Flat. Acevedo complied, his scarred face twisting into a sneer. You know who I work for. You know what happens to people who mess with Vincent's operations. Yeah, they end up in comas. Like my wife. Preston stepped closer, his finger on the trigger aching to squeeze. But he needed information first. How many girls have you moved in the past year? I don't know what you're talking about. Nash moved to the computer, plugging in a USB drive. Military-grade extraction software. We'll have everything on his drive in about 3 minutes. Acevedo's sneer faded. You're making a mistake. No, you made the mistake. Preston lowered his weapon slightly. 2 nights ago, you ran my wife off Highway 47. You tried to kill her. Want to know how I know? He pulled out a phone, playing the video from Bridget's files. Acevedo watched his own image on screen, saw Vincent giving the order. Vincent's going to bury you for this, Acevedo said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Vincent's going to be too busy trying to save himself. Preston pocketed the phone. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything about his operation. Locations, routes, names of everyone involved. You're going to give me enough to destroy him. And if I don't, Preston's smile was cold. Then I shoot you in the kneecaps and let Nash ask the questions. He's got creative interrogation techniques. Acevedo glanced at Nash, who was methodically searching the office drawers. He pulled out a ledger, flipping through pages. Preston, look at this. Shipping manifests coded with pickup and drop-off locations. Cross-reference these with Bridget's files. Nash took photos with his phone. This is gold. We've got evidence of at least 30 transport operations in the past 6 months. Acevedo slumped in his chair. You don't understand. If I talk, Vincent will have me killed. If you don't talk, I'll kill you right now. Choose. For 10 minutes, Acevedo talked. He gave up addresses, names, routes. He confirmed that Vincent's operation was even larger than Bridget had documented. At least 60 victims moved through the city each year, with connections to trafficking rings in 4 other states. He named corrupt officials, including 2 more cops Bridget hadn't identified. Nash recorded everything on his phone. When Acevedo finished, he looked defeated. What now? You going to kill me? Preston considered it. Every instinct screamed to put a bullet in this man's head. He'd hurt Bridget. He'd helped traffic dozens of innocent people. The world would be better without him. But Emma's face flashed in his mind. His daughter, watching him, learning from him. What kind of man did he want to be for her? Nash, call the FBI field office. Anonymous tip. Tell them about this warehouse and what they'll find. Make sure they know to bring a task force. Acevedo's eyes widened. You're turning me over to the feds? You're going to spend the rest of your life in a federal prison. That's worse than death. Preston moved toward the door, then paused. But first, he turned and drove his fist into Acevedo's face, feeling the satisfying crunch of bone. The trucker slumped, unconscious. Nash raised an eyebrow. Feel better? Little bit. Preston shook out his hand. Let's secure him and call it in. 1 down, 4 to go. Chapter 5. The Commissioner. Ernie Good lived in a modest house in the suburbs, a deliberate choice, Preston suspected, to avoid suspicion. A city planning commissioner pulling in a government salary shouldn't have too much wealth on display. But Bridget's files showed offshore accounts worth millions, all traceable to payments from Vincent Rogers. Good was 56, divorced, with 2 adult children who lived out of state. He had a routine. Work until 5 p.m., gym until 6:30, home by 7 o'clock. 3 nights a week, he visited a woman named Christy Kirby in an apartment downtown. The other nights, he stayed home alone, drinking scotch and watching television. Preston decided to visit on a home night. The operation with Acevedo had gone smoothly. By the time FBI agents arrived at the warehouse, they'd found enough evidence to launch a major investigation. Acevedo was in federal custody, singing like a canary in exchange for witness protection. Vincent Rogers probably knew by now that his network was compromised. Good would be spooked, which made him vulnerable. Preston watched the house from across the street. At 7:15 p.m., Good arrived home in his silver Lexus. He looked nervous, constantly checking his mirrors, his hand shaking as he unlocked his door. Nash was positioned at the rear of the house. They'd wait until Good was settled, then move in. At 8 p.m., Preston received Nash's signal. He crossed the street, walking casually like a neighbor out for an evening stroll. The front door had a simple deadbolt. Preston used a bump key, a tool that exploited the mechanical design of most residential locks. Inside in under 10 seconds. Good was in the living room, pouring scotch with shaking hands. He'd removed his jacket and tie, looking disheveled. On the coffee table, Preston spotted a burner phone, probably used to communicate with Vincent. Preston cleared his throat. Good spun around, dropping his glass. It shattered on the hardwood floor. How did you? Sit down, Commissioner. Preston kept his voice conversational, his pistol visible but not aimed. We need to talk about Vincent Rogers. Good's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. That's why you've been paid $3 million over the past 4 years to approve building permits without inspections. That's why you've been coordinating with Vincent to ensure his properties avoid oversight. You can't prove anything. Preston pulled out a tablet, showing him Bridget's financial forensics. Bank transfers, Shell Corporation records, email correspondence. My wife was very thorough. The FBI is going to have all of this by morning. Good sat heavily on the couch, his face crumbling. Oh God. Oh God, they're going to arrest me. Probably. Unless you help me. The commissioner looked up, a desperate hope in his eyes. Help you how? Vincent's going to know his operation is falling apart. Aceveto's in custody, and I'm working my way through everyone else. Vincent will try to run or destroy evidence. I need to know where he'd go, what his contingency plans are. Good shook his head. He doesn't tell me things like that. I just approve his permits and keep inspectors away from certain properties. Not good enough. Preston sat across from him. Vincent's trafficking operation relies on specific buildings with modified construction. You know which ones. I need addresses. If I tell you, Vincent will know it came from me. Vincent's going to prison, Commissioner. The question is whether you spend the rest of your life there too, or whether you cut a deal. Help me, and I'll make sure the FBI knows you cooperated. They might offer immunity or reduce charges. It was a lie, but Good didn't know that. The commissioner stood, paced, then went to his home office. He returned with a list of addresses, 15 properties across the city, all built with hidden rooms and reinforced basements designed for holding people against their will. These are all Vincent's trafficking sites. Some are active, some are backups. There's usually 1 or 2 guards at each location. Good's voice was hollow. I never asked questions. I just took the money and looked the other way. Preston felt disgust wash over him. This man had enabled countless crimes, destroyed countless lives, all for money. But rage wouldn't solve anything. One more thing. Vincent must have a primary site, somewhere he keeps the most important operations. Where is it? Good hesitated. There's a property outside the city. An old factory complex he bought 3 years ago. It's listed as under renovation, but the permits are fake. He uses it as a central hub. Victims are held there before distribution to other locations. Preston made him write down the address. Then he zip-tied Good's hands and called the local FBI field office directly, using a contact from his military days, an agent named Stanley Story who he knew was clean. Stanley, it's Preston Ballard. I'm sending you an address. You'll find City Planning Commissioner Ernie Good, along with evidence of corruption and conspiracy in a human trafficking operation. Arrest him. Good's eyes widened. You said you'd help me. I lied. Preston stood. You enabled monsters. You don't get mercy. As he left, he could hear Good sobbing. Preston felt no pity. 2 down. Chapter 6. The Detective. Louis Barton was more dangerous than Good or Acevedo. A detective with 20 years on the force, he had resources, training, and a network of other dirty cops. He also had a reputation for violence. Bridget's notes indicated he'd personally killed at least 2 witnesses who'd threatened to expose Vincent's operation. Taking him down would require a different approach. Preston spent a day researching Barton's patterns. The detective worked robbery-homicide, giving him access to crime scenes and evidence rooms. He also ran a side business, using his badge to intimidate people for Vincent, sometimes arranging accidents for problems that needed permanent solutions. But Barton had a weakness: gambling. He visited an underground poker game every Friday night in a back room of a bar called the Copper Tap. The game was run by local organized crime, and Barton was deep in debt. Vincent had been bailing him out in exchange for services. Preston decided to use that debt as leverage. Friday night, Preston arrived at the Copper Tap at 9 p.m. The bar was crowded, filled with blue-collar workers and off-duty cops. Preston kept his head down, moving toward the back where a heavy-set man guarded a doorway. Private game, the guard said. I'm here to see Detective Barton. Tell him it's about Vincent Rogers. The guard's expression flickered. He made a call, spoke quietly, then nodded. Go ahead. The back room was thick with cigar smoke. 6 men sat around a poker table, cards and cash spread out. Barton was in the middle, a stack of chips in front of him. He looked up as Preston entered, his hand moving instinctively toward the shoulder holster beneath his jacket. Who the hell are you? Friend of Bridget Ballard. We need to talk. Barton's face hardened. He stood, motioning for Preston to follow him to a corner of the room. The other players watched with interest. You've got 30 seconds before I arrest you for trespassing, Barton said. Arrest me? With what badge? The one you've been using to cover up murders for Vincent Rogers. Preston kept his voice low. Al Aceveto's in federal custody. Ernie Good's singing to the FBI. Vincent's operation is collapsing, and you're going down with it unless you're smart. You don't know what you're talking about. Preston pulled out his phone, showing him photos of Bridget's evidence. Bank transfers. Communications. A list of names of people Barton had helped eliminate. My wife documented everything. The FBI has copies. They're coming for you, detective. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. And when they do, you're looking at life in federal prison for murder and conspiracy. Barton's jaw clenched. What do you want? Testify against Vincent. Give them everything. Names, locations, operations. In exchange, maybe the feds offer you a deal. Witness protection, reduced sentence. You might see daylight again before you're 90. Vincent will have me killed. Vincent's going to be too busy trying to save himself. Make your choice. Loyalty to a sinking ship, or save yourself. For a long moment, Barton said nothing. Then he laughed bitterly. You think I haven't thought about flipping? Vincent's got leverage on everyone. You go against him, he destroys your life. He's got evidence that could put me away for decades. Then you're already destroyed. At least this way, you get something in return. Barton looked at the poker table, at the life he'd built on corruption and blood money. Finally, he nodded. What do you need me to do? Preston spent the next hour with Barton, recording everything. The detective confirmed much of what Bridget had discovered and added new details, locations of safe houses, names of other corrupt officials, and critically, Vincent's personal security arrangements. Vincent's got a compound outside the city, Barton said. The factory Good told you about. He's got private security there, ex-military guys. At least 10 of them, armed with automatic weapons. If he knows the operation's compromised, that's where he'll go. It's his fortress. How do I get to him? You don't. The place is locked down. Cameras, motion sensors, armed guards. You'd need an army to breach it. Preston smiled grimly. Good thing I know where to find one. After the meeting, Preston called Stanley Story at the FBI. Preston, we picked up Commissioner Good. He's cooperating fully. What else do you have? Detective Lewis Barton, NYPD robbery homicide. He's ready to turn state's evidence against Vincent Rogers. But we need to move fast. Rogers knows his network is compromised, and he's going to run. Where is he? Preston gave him the factory address. But it's a fortress. You'll need a tactical team. We've been building a case based on the evidence you provided. Give us 48 hours, and we can get a warrant and SWAT deployment. 48 hours is too long. Rogers will destroy evidence and vanish. Preston paused. What if I told you I could get inside? Get you everything you need for an airtight case. Preston, don't do anything stupid. Let us handle this. Clock's ticking, Stanley. I'll be in touch. He ended the call. Nash looked at him skeptically. You're really going to hit that compound? We're going to hit it. But first, we need to deal with Vincent's lawyer. Chapter 7. The Lawyer. Wes Mead's law office occupied the top floor of a prestigious downtown building. Mead and Associates specialized in corporate law, but Wes's real value to Vincent was in making problems disappear, whether through legal maneuvering or more creative solutions. According to Bridget's files, Wes had helped establish the shell corporations Vincent used to launder money. He'd also represented several of Vincent's employees in criminal proceedings, ensuring they stayed loyal by keeping them out of prison. But Wes had made a mistake. He'd kept copies of everything, insurance against Vincent ever turning on him. Those copies were in a safe in his office. Preston had learned this from Detective Barton, who'd once worked with Wes on a case. The safe contained documents that could link Vincent directly to dozens of crimes. Getting into the building required more finesse than the previous operations. It had security guards, keycard access, and surveillance cameras. A direct assault would be impossible, so Preston went during business hours, dressed in a suit and carrying a briefcase. He walked through the lobby with confident stride, nodding at the security guard. Delivery for Wes Mead's office, he said, holding up the briefcase. You need to sign in. Preston signed a fake name and took the visitor badge. The elevator required a key card, but he followed a group of lawyers heading up, slipping in with a casual, thanks for holding it. Floor 23. The elevator dinged, and Preston stepped out into plush carpeted hallways. Mead and Associates took up the entire floor. Through glass doors, he could see a reception area with a young woman answering phones. Preston walked in. "I'm here to see Wes Mead. I have a 2 p.m. appointment." The receptionist checked her computer, frowning. "I don't see anything scheduled. He called me personally this morning. Said it was urgent." Preston smiled disarmingly. "Something about the Rogers development case?" At the mention of Vincent's company, her expression shifted. "Let me check with Mr. Mead." She picked up the phone, spoke quietly, then hung up. "Mr. Mead says he doesn't have time today. If you'd like to schedule, tell him it's about Bridget Ballard's evidence. I'm sure he'll make time." Her eyes widened slightly. Another call. This time, her expression was nervous. "Mr. Mead will see you. Down the hall, last office on the left." Preston walked through the maze of cubicles and offices. Lawyers hunched over desks, paralegals rushing between rooms. No one gave him a second glance. Wes Mead's office was impressive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, expensive art on the walls, a mahogany desk that probably cost more than Preston's car. Wes himself was in his late 40s, trim and polished, with the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Ballard, I presume?" Wes gestured to a chair. "I was sorry to hear about your wife's accident." "It wasn't an accident." "Of course not. But that's what the police report will say." Wes folded his hands. "Let's dispense with games. You have evidence that could damage my client. You want something in exchange for not using it. What's your price?" Preston leaned back. "I don't want money. I want Vincent Rogers destroyed." Wes's smile faded. "That's not going to happen. Vincent is protected by very powerful people. Even if you go to the authorities, it will take years to build a case. By then, evidence will have disappeared. Witnesses will have recanted or vanished. You can't touch him. I've already touched him. His trucker's in federal custody. His commissioner and detective are cooperating with the FBI. His entire network is compromised." For the first time, Wes looked unsettled. "If that's true, then Vincent already knows. And if he knows, then you and your daughter are in danger. Vincent doesn't leave loose ends." "Neither do I." Preston stood, moving to the window. "I know about the safe, Wes. The one with all your insurance documents. I know you've been keeping copies of everything. Proof of Vincent's crimes, proof of your involvement. I'm guessing you plan to use them if Vincent ever tried to throw you under the bus." Wes's face went carefully blank. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't. So you won't mind if I tell Vincent that you've been keeping evidence against him. I'm sure he'll be very understanding." "You bastard." Preston turned back to face him. "Give me the documents, testify against Vincent, and you might walk away from this. Refuse, and I'll make sure Vincent knows you've been betraying him. Then you can explain to him why you're not a loose end he needs to eliminate." Wes stood, paced to the window, his hands trembling slightly. "You don't understand. Vincent isn't just a criminal. He's connected to people who make criminals look like saints. Russian mob, cartels, corrupt politicians. If I turn on him, I'm a dead man. If you don't turn on him, you're a dead man anyway. FBI's already building their case. When they come for Vincent, they'll come for everyone around him. You'll go to prison, and eventually, Vincent will have you killed to ensure you don't talk. Your only chance is to cooperate now, get immunity, and disappear into witness protection." Wes stared out at the city, his expression tortured. Finally, he walked to the far wall, pressing a hidden panel. A safe revealed itself. He entered a code, and the door swung open. Inside were files, documents, hard drives, recordings. Years of evidence. "Take it," Wes said quietly. "Just make sure the FBI knows I cooperated. I don't want to die in prison." Preston gathered the materials. "You're doing the right thing." "No, I'm doing the only thing." Wes looked broken. "Vincent's going to kill me for this. Not if we get him first." Chapter 8. The Fortress. The factory compound sat on 15 acres of industrial land, surrounded by high fences topped with razor wire. A single access road led to the main gate, where guards checked credentials. According to Detective Barton's intel, Vincent had moved into the compound 2 days ago, consolidating his security and preparing for siege. Preston and Nash observed from a distance, using high-powered optics to map the facility. They counted 12 guards on rotating patrols, plus an unknown number inside. Thermal imaging showed at least 30 heat signatures in the main building, guards, staff, and likely some trafficking victims still being held. "This is insane," Nash said. "We can't assault this place with just the two of us." "We're not assaulting it. We're infiltrating it." Preston had been studying the facility's design. This used to be a textile factory. The old sewer and utility tunnels still connect to the city's underground system. They'd have been sealed during renovation, but I'm betting Vincent's people didn't seal them properly. Too much work, and they didn't expect anyone to find them. Nash pulled up city engineering documents on his tablet. There, storm drain system runs within 50 feet of the compound's eastern perimeter. If we can access it, we might be able to breach from underground. That's the play. We go in tonight, use the tunnels to get inside, extract evidence and any victims, then signal the FBI to move in. And Vincent? Preston's expression hardened. I'll deal with Vincent. They waited until 2 a.m. before moving. The storm drain access was a mile away, hidden in a wooded area. Preston and Nash descended into the underground system, using night vision and blueprints to navigate the tunnels. The air was damp and smelled of rust and mold, but the tunnels were structurally sound. After 30 minutes of careful progress, they reached the section beneath the compound. Above them, they could hear the faint rumble of machinery. Preston examined the ceiling, finding a sealed access hatch. It had been welded shut, but the welds were poor quality, probably done quickly and without inspection. Nash used a portable cutting torch, carefully slicing through the metal. The hatch opened into a sub-basement filled with old equipment and storage. They emerged quietly, weapons ready. The sub-basement was dark and silent. Preston led the way up a stairwell to the main level. The factory floor was vast, rows of old machinery, offices converted into holding cells, and at the far end, a command center where guards monitored security feeds. Preston counted 6 guards on this level, spread out across the facility. We need to disable communications first, Nash whispered. If they call for backup, we're done. They moved through shadows toward the command center. One guard sat at a bank of monitors, bored and distracted by his phone. Preston approached from behind, using a sleeper hold to render him unconscious without noise. Nash zip-tied him and disabled the communication equipment. Guards are on 20-minute patrol cycles, Nash observed, watching the feeds. Next patrol comes through in 12 minutes. Preston accessed the computer, pulling up building schematics. Vincent's office was on the 3rd floor, in what used to be the factory's administrative wing. According to the schematics, there was also a vault room adjacent to the office, probably where Vincent kept his most sensitive materials. They moved upward, encountering 2 more guards on the 2nd floor. Both were neutralized efficiently. On the 3rd floor, the environment changed. Expensive carpeting, renovated walls, artwork. Vincent had transformed this section into a luxury suite. 4 guards stood outside Vincent's office, alert and armed with automatic rifles. Can't stealth our way past these guys, Nash murmured. Don't need to. Preston pulled out a phone, dialing a number. Inside the office, a phone rang. One of the guards glanced back, then opened the door to check. Preston could hear Vincent's voice, irritated. Who the hell is calling at this hour? The guard spoke to Vincent, then returned. Boss says he's not taking calls. Preston ended the call and immediately called again. And again. On the 4th call, Vincent's voice roared from inside the office. Answer the damn phone and tell whoever it is I'm busy. A guard picked up the desk phone. Hello. Preston spoke calmly. Tell Vincent Rogers that Preston Ballard is here to see him. And if he doesn't want his guards to die in the next 60 seconds, he should tell them to stand down. The guard's expression shifted. He relayed the message. A moment later, Vincent's voice. Let him in. The guards parted, weapons still raised but no longer aimed. Preston walked through, Nash covering his back. Vincent Rogers sat behind a massive desk, looking older than Preston remembered. Stress had carved lines into his face, and his eyes held a desperate, cornered look. Preston. Vincent's voice was carefully controlled. I wondered when you'd show up. Stand up. Hands where I can see them. Vincent complied slowly. You're making a mistake. You think you've won because you've arrested some of my people? I have resources you can't imagine. Lawyers who'll tie up any case for years. Officials who'll make evidence disappear. You can't touch me. Your trucker, your commissioner, your detective, and your lawyer have all flipped. They're giving the FBI everything. Every crime, every victim, every dollar. Your empire is finished. Vincent's face twisted. You sanctimonious bastard. You think you're a hero? You think any of this matters? There will always be people like me, and there will always be people willing to pay for what I provide. You're not stopping anything. You're just inconveniencing me. Preston felt rage burn through him. You tried to kill my wife. Your wife should have minded her own business. Vincent's voice was cold. She was digging into things that didn't concern her. What did she think would happen? She thought she'd expose a monster. And she did. Vincent laughed bitterly. Bridget was naive. She thought justice existed, that good people prevail. But the world doesn't work that way, Preston. The world runs on money and power. I have both. You have neither. So how do you think this ends? Preston raised his pistol. With you in chains or in the ground. Your choice. For a moment, Vincent looked like he might go for a weapon. But then doors burst open. FBI tactical teams flooded the hallway. Agents in body armor with rifles raised. Stanley Story entered, looking between Preston and Vincent. Preston, lower your weapon. Preston didn't move. His finger was on the trigger, every instinct screaming to shoot. Preston, Stanley said firmly. I know what he did. But if you kill him, you're the one who goes to prison. Let us take him. Let the system work. The system failed my wife. He walks free while she's in a coma. He's not walking free. We have enough evidence to put him away for life. Multiple life sentences. Human trafficking, murder, conspiracy. He'll die in prison. Stanley moved closer. But you need to lower your weapon. For Emma. For Bridget. Don't become what he is. Preston's hand shook. He looked at Vincent, saw the smug confidence in his eyes. Vincent believed he'd escape justice, that his lawyers would find a way. Preston lowered his weapon. FBI agents swarmed Vincent, cuffing him and reading his rights. As they led him away, Vincent looked back at Preston, smiling coldly. See you soon, Preston. Chapter 9, Justice. 3 months later, Preston sat in a hospital room, holding Bridget's hand. The doctors had slowly reduced her sedation, and yesterday she'd opened her eyes for the first time. Today, she was awake, weak but conscious. You got him, she whispered, her voice raspy. We got him. Preston squeezed her hand gently. Vincent's in federal prison awaiting trial. The FBI found 43 trafficking victims at his facilities. They're all safe now. Acevedo, Good, Barton, and Meade are all cooperating witnesses in exchange for reduced sentences. Vincent's entire network has been dismantled. Emma. She's safe. She's at school right now, but she'll be here after. She's been so strong, Bridge. So brave. Tears slipped down Bridget's cheeks. I was so scared. I thought he'd kill you both. He tried, but he didn't count on you leaving behind everything we needed to stop him. Preston touched her face gently. You saved those girls, Bridge. Your investigation, your evidence, it made all the difference. The trial took 6 weeks. Vincent's lawyers tried every trick, but the evidence was overwhelming. Testimony from his former associates, financial records, videos, victim statements. The jury deliberated for 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. The judge sentenced Vincent Rogers to 8 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. Preston was in the courtroom when the verdict was read. He watched Vincent's face crumble, watched the realization that he'd never be free again. As marshals led him away, Vincent looked at Preston one final time. Preston didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply nodded once, an acknowledgement that justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Preston ignored them, walking to where Nash waited by his car. It's over, Nash said. Yeah. Preston felt a weight lift. It's over. What now? Now I go home to my family. Help Bridget recover. Spend time with Emma. Try to build a normal life again. Nash clapped him on the shoulder. You did good, Preston. You could have killed him. A lot of people would have. But you chose the harder path. I wanted him dead. Part of me still does. But Emma deserves a father who shows her that justice is better than revenge. 6 months later, Bridget had recovered enough to come home. She'd need physical therapy for months, possibly years, but she was alive and getting stronger every day. Emma helped her mother into the house, both of them laughing at something. Preston watched from the doorway, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. His family was safe. The victims had been rescued. Vincent was gone. That night, as Emma slept and Bridget rested, Preston went to his study. He pulled out the box containing Bridget's investigation files, the evidence that had brought down a monster. He should probably donate them to a legal library or historical archive. They represented months of painstaking work, courage in the face of danger. But for now, he just held them, remembering everything that had happened. The fear, the rage, the choice to do things the right way, even when the wrong way would have felt so satisfying. His phone buzzed. A text from Stanley Story. Appeals denied. Rogers is never getting out. Thought you should know. Preston smiled and deleted the message. He walked to Emma's room, checking on her sleeping form. His daughter, brave, smart, strong. She'd been through hell, and she'd come out the other side. In Bridget's room, his wife was awake, reading by lamplight. She looked up as he entered. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Just wanted to make sure you were both okay." "We're okay, Preston. Thanks to you. Thanks to us. You started this. I just finished it." Bridget set down her book. "No more secrets. No more investigations. I'm done with that life." "Good. Because I'm done with the hero business too." Preston sat beside her. "From now on, we're just a normal family." Normal sounds perfect. Outside, the city continued its eternal rhythm. Somewhere, there were still monsters hiding in shadows. But tonight, for Preston Ballard and his family, there was only peace. And that was enough. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.